What is up, YouTube? Dots Gaming here, and today I'm proud to bring you guys the updated version of my How to Build Your Character for Success ESO Beginner Guide. I originally created this video in early 2017 as a natural successor to my ESO Complete Beginner Guide. While the Complete Beginner Guide went over what everything is in ESO and explained everything in depth, and especially my newest one goes really in depth, I created this video as kind of like a how to implement all of the things your first go around the game and your first time going through the game. ESO is a really big game. There's a lot to it, and for new players, it can definitely seem really intimidating. So I like this video as a follow-up, like I said, to my Complete Beginner Guide, to really kind of go over in practice how you should implement certain things. I know I do have the leveling builds on my website, and for some people, those are really good. They like to have that path to follow, but some people, you know, they know exactly what build they want to do, so maybe the leveling builds aren't necessarily for them. They know exactly what endgame build they want, or other people have no clue what they want to do and want to, you know, kind of explore everything and see what their options are. And oftentimes, and the thing that the leveling builds don't cover is they don't cover things like, you know, what you need to be upgrading, what you should be saving your gold for, other, you know, like crafting tips for while you're leveling, maybe some, you know, easy gold making guides. Those, you know, the leveling builds don't cover that. But this How to Build Your Character for Success video will show you how to build that first character, like I said, for success in all departments, and show you how to really easily go around the game your first time around and be prepped and ready to go when you get to the end of the game. Now, before you watch this video, though, you should know the basics about the game. So if you haven't already, please check out my ESO Complete Beginner Guide. You can find it in the description below. And if you have, you know, it's a long guide. It's not meant to be watched in one sitting. It's meant to be kind of digested in pieces. But if I'm going, you know, at the very least, you should know things like, you know, magicka, stamina, various crafting terms. And if any of the things I say confuse you during this video, please refer to that guide and watch the relevant sections, and you'll be able to understand what I'm saying here. But this is kind of for somebody who knows the basic terminology, because, you know, this is already going to be a pretty lengthy video. And if I was to go over all that basic terminology again here, it would be way longer than it needs to be. So that's pretty much it for terms of intro, but let me get into the next part. I'm going to talk about how I'm going to break this guide down. So I'm going to basically cover two different paths that people will take in this game. I like this format from my original guide, and I want to keep it because I think it's still very, very true. I'm just going to obviously flesh out the information a bit more. I like the focused perspective and the unfocused perspective. The focused perspective is, again, somebody who's maybe watched some guides, watched some videos, maybe seen some builds, and they kind of know exactly what they want to do. You know, I want to be a magicka Nightblade DPS. I want to be a Dragon Knight tank. Like, they know pretty much what they want to do, but just want to know how to get their character from point A to point B. Other people, on the other hand, have never played ESO before, do not know what it's about, maybe have never even played an MMO before, and they just want to pick a character and explore and try things out. And I want to be able to guide both people, you know, both types of people, in the direction of success in ESO. So that is what this guide's going to cover, two different paths. So I would still recommend watching this entire video, as your path may change throughout your leveling process, but I'm going to cover information that's relevant to both paths first, and then I'm going to do the focused perspective and then the unfocused perspective after that. So if you guys have, again, any basic questions or anything that you're curious about, you can find that in the description below. I also will have timestamps to the different section in the pinned comments. Please do not skip around if you don't know, like, certain info. Like don't skip around without listening to this intro and listening to the explanation. You know, don't skip to the focused perspective if you didn't listen to both sections yet. Don't skip to the unfocused if you haven't listened to both sections yet. So I'll have timestamps if you want to come back and refer to them, but I would really recommend for full informational absorption to just watch the full video. But enough of me talking about this introduction. Let's get right into the guide. All right, so the first thing we're going to cover is information for both perspectives, for both the focused and unfocused path. I'm not going to cover race here, as in my opinion, the race that you're going to choose is going to basically depend on which path you're taking, whether or not you know exactly what you want to do or you want to be able to experiment. I actually have different recommendations for both types of people. So instead, right now, we are just going to go over class choices. Again, class tends to be a bit more of a general thing. So, you know, again, people who know exactly what they want to do probably have a rough idea of what class they want to be, but others don't. So I will go over what the different classes are and what your choices are. So you have 5 class options available to you in the Elder Scrolls Online. One is more of a paid option. You need to buy it from the Crown Store, but the other 4 come with the base game. Now, the first class that we have is the Dragon Knight. It is exactly as it sounds. It is focused around dragons thematically, lots of spikes, lots of fire, and lots of poisons. But do not let that make you think that they are just tanks or beefy, heavy armor wearing knights. They can do anything. One of, the guys I play with on a regular basis, he plays a DK healer. DKs are also amazing tanks. They can play as cloth, wearing magicka focused people where that just really use magic skills, or you can even just use full stamina and go full in for the knight poison perspective. So Dragon Knight is going to, again, that's it. If you like dragons, spikes, fire, poison, then the Dragon Knight is going to be for you. And when you heal, you utilize things like ash and healing flames instead to help aid your allies. So it's a very good class, especially if you love dragons thematically. We also have the sorcerer. The sorcerer is, I think in my opinion, the ESO sorcerer is kind of like your stereotypical mage. When you think of mage inside of ESO, sorcerer is pretty much at least what comes to my mind. You utilize a lot of lightning, you use Daedric pets to help you do your bidding, but that's mostly for the magicka sorcerer perspective, aka a sorcerer that utilizes magicka to their advantage and use those type of spells. If you want to be a more physical damage dealing person, aka stamina, you are then instead going to utilize wind to your advantage and use that element instead. And again, sorcerers can play your stereotypical magicka user. You could also, again, like I said, be a physical damage dealer. They can also heal and tank as well. Sorcerer tanks are very cool, very, very fun. And both the tank and the healer, I know that there's different pets that really will help you out with tanking and with healing. So if you like a pet-focused playstyle, Sorcerer would definitely be for you. They don't have to use pets, but they are a really, really good option for you if that's what you like. We also have the Nightblade. Now, the Nightblade is what you're going to think of when it comes to the rogue in ESO. If you like your stealth, your stabby with the daggers and the bow, with utilizing stealth inside of combat, Nightblade is going to be the class for you. Now, obviously, that sounds like more like a stamina version. If you're using bows and daggers, you're going to be dealing primarily physical based damage. But what's cool about the Nightblade is that if you want to play a more magic centric Nightblade, you're going to be utilizing blood and siphoning your enemy's life force in order to deal your damage. So if you like that type of bloodbender play style, then the magic and Nightblade is going to be for you. You also utilize a lot of shadow magic. It's a fun class to play if that's the kind of theme you like. And I personally also play a Nightblade tank. They're really, really fun. So again, you utilize the shadows primarily while you're tanking. It's really, really cool. And then for healing, if you like to basically, again, heal with siphoning type magic where you use your own life force as well as the life force of your enemies to heal people, then the Nightblade will be for you. You also have your Templar. Templar is going to be, again, your stereotypical priest slash paladin inside of ESO. Obviously, it's basically that kind of title kind of covers it all. You can be a big two-handed wielding damage dealing physical paladin if you want to, Templar I mean, or you can again equip a sword and shield and be a tank. You can also utilize the light or even some darkness to deal some damage as your Templar, or you can obviously use the healing powers of the light as a a healing Templar and be a priest. It's the name of the class is pretty consistent with it thematically. It's a Templar, again, priest and paladin. So if that's the kind of vibe you like, then Templar is going to be for you. And our final class introduced in the Morrowind chapter is the Warden. Now, the Warden is not included in the base game, and you do need to pay crowns to get them out of the crown store, but it is worth it if the class appeals to you thematically. It's a really fun class in my opinion, and it's definitely worth it if thematically it appeals to you. Now, Wardens primarily utilized frost magic animal companions, as well as nature magic to do its healing, tanking, and damage. And all all 4 styles, physical damage, magical damage, tanking, and healing, kind of utilize all 3 skill lines, to do its stuff. So it's kind of like, while with the Nightblade, I could say, you primarily use blood magic as a magical damage healer, but as a tank, you primarily utilize shadows. Wardens really kind of dip into all 3 lines when they do their things. The nature magic is really more focused around healing. The frost magic is more focused around tanking and a little bit of damage, while the animal companion skill line is focused really heavily around damage. So fun class though. If you like the whole nature / frost vibe, the Warden is definitely for you. Now, people always ask me, Dots, which class should I play? Which class is the best? Which class should I go with? In my opinion, you should choose the class that appeals to you most thematically. If I just tell you, oh, X class is the best now, that can change in a patch. That can change in 2 patches. You don't know. Balance comes and goes. What's overpowered and what's underpowered constantly changes. But if you play what you find fun and what you find enjoyable, you'll always be good. You'll always be having fun and having a good time. Now, every class can play every role in ESO. You can tank on a Templar, you could heal on a Dragon Knight, you can deal damage on a Warden, physical damage, or you can deal magical damage on a Sorcerer. You can do whatever you want. Every class can really fill every role. So, again, I would really recommend just picking what you like and what you think will be the most enjoyable. The next section that I'm going to cover is crafting. A lot of people are worried when they start ESO that their main can't be their crafter, that they need a specific crafting tune, that there isn't enough skill points in the game, and I have people ask me about that constantly. You can absolutely 100% have your main be your crafter as well as your main character. This guy alone has like 5 different builds on him at least, and he's a crafter, a max level crafter with all of the skill points in it, and I think 4 or 5 different professions. So he has a ton. There's enough skill points to do all the crafting professions if you want to, as well as have some builds on one character. There are enough skill points for that, so do not think you need to make one specific crafting tune. I will cover later in the guide how you should spend your skill points. So, in my opinion, you should focus on crafting later and focus on getting your build first, but we will cover that later in the video. But this is just going to be about crafting. Now, the biggest thing I think you need to focus on when you're leveling up through the game when it comes to crafting is you need to focus on 2 things: the deconstruction of items as well as research. Those are, in my opinion, the 2 biggest things that you need to focus on. You can also, I do recommend getting certified in all of the crafting professions. It gives you a very introductory lesson to all the crafting professions, as well as gives you the ability to do writs, which are little quests that you can do every single day that give you what's called inspiration points, which is the experience line for the crafting professions. So you get that little bit of inspiration per day, plus you get a little bit of gold, and they're really nice to do. So you can get certified in woodworking, blacksmithing, and clothing at the Fighters Guild, and you can get certified in alchemy, provisioning, and enchanting at the Mages Guild, and jewelry crafting is going to have to be done in Somerset if you do have Somerset. So once you are certified and you get the basics done and you know all the basics about crafting, this part of the guide will be much easier to understand. So the 2 things, like I said, I would recommend focusing on are deconstruction and improvement. Now, why deconstruction? Deconstruction is the best way to level up clothing, woodworking, blacksmithing, enchanting, and jewelry crafting. Deconstructing things that you have that you do not need into their raw materials is the best way and the most efficient way to gain experience. Not only that, those raw materials are really, really good to sell for some gold while you are leveling up. I would definitely recommend selling like the really low level, especially the woodworking, clothing, and blacksmithing mats. Selling those while you level up is super, super helpful for getting like an early stream of gold coming into your character while you're also going out into the world and picking up crafting nodes as you see them. Definitely recommend that. Really easy way to make gold. And making gold from quests and anything that you get from dungeons, but it's a really nice and easy way to make gold while you level. So definitely be on top of your deconstruction for pieces that you do not need. Gear that you have no longer have use for, definitely deconstruct it. Like I said, fastest way to level. And even if you do not ever plan on being a crafter, I still recommend it because you never know. You might change your mind. It's definitely worth doing. And plus, I recommend it because being able to craft your own stuff is way cheaper than needing to buy it. So trust me, I recommend doing the crafting. But even more important than that, in my opinion, even more important than that is research. Researching gear traits is incredibly important. Now, some people might say, what are gear traits? So if you look on this Cuirass of the Dragon, it is infused. You can see right in the middle. Increases the armor enchantment of this gear by 7. I can totally read. Increase the armor enchantment effect by 17%. So that is the trait on this gear. So as you can see, my multi-effect enchantment right above that is increased by 17%. Now, if I want to create an infused gear piece of my own, my character needs to know what infused is. So I would need to go to a crafting table with a piece of gear that has the infused trait on it, come to this research tab and click infused for that piece of gear, and the gear will be destroyed and my character will learn that trait over X amount of time. Now, people might be wondering, well, why is it so important to start at an early level? The reason is because those timers for the research get longer and longer and longer with each piece of gear that you research per type. So what do I mean by that? So let's say I'm on robes, right? The first piece is only going to take, maybe 6 hours to research. If I do sturdy, it's only going to take like 6 hours. But then if I research impenetrable robes, that might take 12 hours. And then if I research reinforced, that's going to take 24 hours and then 48 hours. And as you can see, it gets longer and longer and longer, with your last piece taking a month to research, your last trait taking a month to research. And as you can see, there's a lot of different types of gear, and this is just for the clothing table. There's also the woodworking table and the blacksmithing table. So keeping a constant stream of research while you're leveling up is incredibly important because it makes sure that your character knows those traits when you get to the end of the game. And the reason, again, that traits are so important, besides the fact that if you want to even craft gear with that trait, is that for certain gear sets, you need to have a certain number of traits research. So for example, if I want to create gear that requires 6 traits research, to even craft a chest of that gear set in the first place, I need to have 6 of these traits here research before I can even craft it at all. So that's why it's very important. And there's also something called transmutation. I have a separate guide on transmutation. I can cover it in the complete beginner guide, but a Cliff Notes version is that it is changing the trait from one thing to another. So I can change my Cuirass of the Dragon from infused to sturdy. But you need to have that trait researched before you can transmute. That is why research is so important. Definitely make sure that you're keeping your research timers going. And like I said, the best way to level up most of the professions, like I said, woodworking, clothing, blacksmithing, enchanting, and jewelry crafting, is just deconstructing things that you get. So always be sure that you're doing that, as well as creating things when you can for alchemy and provisioning. Now, the rule of thumb I like to use for gear while I level is it better than what I'm currently wearing? If so, I put it on. If not, I check, do I have this piece of gear researched? If I do, I deconstruct the piece. If I don't, I put it in my bank and, save it for eventual research. There will be icons on the gear in your bags that tell you if you have it researched or not. There will be like a little magnifying glass if you can research that piece of gear, or if it's ornate, which means you can sell it for extra gold. I would recommend vendoring those pieces, or intricate, which means if you deconstruct it, you will get extra inspiration from that piece. And if you're on PC, there are also a ton of different crafting add-ons that you can use to see your research across multiple characters. But assuming that we're just talking about your first toon and your main toon, the base game tells you whether or not you have researched a trait or not. The next thing that I'm going to cover is getting your guilds when you first start. In my opinion, the first thing that you should do when you get to your faction's main town, like the main starter town, is acquire the 3 base game guilds right away because they are incredibly important to your character's progression throughout the game. The Mages Guild, the Fighters Guild, and the Undaunted all have, in my opinion, some pretty necessary passives to your character's progression and some pretty necessary, skills for your character throughout the game. And you will regret not having those guilds started right when you start the game and then trying to go back and do them later on, because one of them levels up. The Undaunted levels up through doing dungeons, which you'll be running as you play through the game. The Mages Guild involves collecting books that you find throughout the world, so it's an easy way to level. You can level that easily while you're exploring and while you're questing. And the Fighters Guild levels up through killing Daedra, and there's tons spreaded throughout the world, so you will be killing them constantly throughout your quest. So it's a really easy guild skill line to level up while you play. Now, where do I get these and how do I acquire them? You can find the Undaunted inside of your inn of the starter town. You can also find the Mages Guild here, shown by this icon, and the Fighters Guild shown by the sword icon right here. Now, this is Daggerfall. This is the starting town for the Daggerfall Covenant, so you can find the Undaunted here in the Rosy Lion. For the Aldmeri Dominion, you will find them in Auradon and Volkel Guard in the inn here, so that is the Salted Wings Tavern. And then for the Ebonheart Pact, you will be going to Davin's Watch, and you will find them in the Fish Stink. So I would definitely acquire those 3 guilds right when you start off. The next thing that I'm going to cover is the best way to level up in ESO your first time around. And in my opinion, that is questing, doing your daily dungeon, as well as your daily battlegrounds. So your daily dungeon, your daily battlegrounds, your first one of the day, gives a ton of additional benefits. As you can see, from just doing my first of these daily events, I get 101,000 additional experience, and I get premium Undaunted exploration supplies or premium battleground supplies. So making sure to do these once a day will not only get you acclimated to the dungeons in the game, which, by the way, whenever you do those dungeons for the first time, they all have a quest, which gives you a skill point, really, really nice, as well as a huge bump to your character's experience. Same thing with BGs. When you do that first BG, if you get in first or second place, you will get these premium battleground supplies, which does come with some nice stuff for your character, some nice gear, and some other rewards. And the cool thing about doing the dungeons especially is that you can acquire gear through those dungeons. So if you run dungeons regularly, you can always make sure that your character is in freshly updated gear. You'll always have new gear coming into your character. It also makes it super easy to leveling up your crafting professions. You'll be getting a ton of extra gear, materials, supplies. You'll be getting soul gems, which are needed to revive yourself and others if you or they die. So running dungeons regularly is going to be extremely important to keeping, like I said, supplies, gear, soul shards, and other things incoming on your character. Well, battlegrounds, running a battleground, it's good, it's fun. This is a PvP, small, 4v4 PvP, and it's fun because you get the extra battleground supplies and you get the huge boost to experience. But dungeons definitely give you more bang for your buck, especially while you're leveling, just in terms of that, because again, you get all the gear and extra supplies from them. But besides that, questing is really, really good. One, because this isn't a theme park MMO. The leveling isn't a means to an end, but rather a journey in and of itself. You get to experience the quests and the storylines of different zones. All the quests are voice acted and really, really well done. And for me, I really enjoyed leveling up in ESO my first time around. It's not just, go acquire 10 more tusks and come back to me. You feel attached to and a part of the world, and you actually do have to make decisions in certain quests that you cannot go back and turn on. And NPCs will also have unique dialogue to you based on quests that you've done and decisions that you've made, which in my opinion is really, really cool. Also, while you go throughout the world, there are tons of things to see and explore that you're going to miss out on if you choose to, let's say, grind, right? You have these way shrines, which are your methods of fast travel. So while you explore, if you come across a way shrine and walk near it, you will have discovered it. So you can now fast travel from that way shrine to another, or teleport back to that one for a gold cost, assuming you're not at a way shrine already. You can also discover lore books, which are necessary to level up the Mages Guild, as I just previously talked about. You can also kill Daedra while you're questing to level up the Fighters Guild. And then, like I said, making sure to do those dungeons will help you level up the Undaunted. But if you just choose to grind your character's experience, you will not have any of this done. Yeah, sure, your character will be level 50, but you won't have that many skill points. You will not have any lore books. You will not have any way shrines. It is, in my opinion, for your first time around, it really shortchanges your learning experience, especially because, yeah, questing does take a little bit longer, but you're going to learn more about your character during that time than if you just have somebody that you know run you around an area and get you to level 50. You're not going to know anything by doing that. So I really would recommend your first time just questing and taking the game in and enjoying the process. In terms of questing and where to quest, though, it's really up to you based on what you want to do. ESO is very sandboxy in nature, so you can really pick and choose what zones you want to quest in, what quest lines you want to follow, and just like I said, what you want to do. No two playthroughs have to be the same. There is only one quest line that I do recommend everybody does, especially your first time on your first character, and that is the main quest line, which is going to basically be, you'll be getting it at the Harbridge at all times. It's in 3 different zones, all the starting zones. But the reason that's so important in following that quest line when you get back to the mainland of Tamriel is because every single quest completion for this main quest line, the Molag Bal quest line, gives you a ton of experience and a skill point. Very, very important. So if you spawn at Somerset or if you spawned in Vardenfell, and you look and you zoom back at your map, you will see way shrines to these main places that you can get to. Okay, you will see way shrines at these starting zones that you can get to. You can teleport to them and start off those quest lines there. You're not trapped at all. Or if you for some reason can't find those, there are NPCs in Vivec City, and I'm sure there's one in Somerset that will take you back to the mainlands so that you can actually get back to those quest lines. But if you just open up your map and zoom out, you will see other way shrines on the map that you can just teleport and get back to here. And when you do first teleport, an NPC will pop up to you and basically offer you the main quest. So I do absolutely at some point recommend following that. It is definitely well worth the time. The next thing I'm going to cover is Vampire versus Werewolf versus Mortal. And this is going to be a very abridged version. I have a standalone guide on my YouTube channel that you could check out, or it's also part of the complete beginner guide. But for today, I'm going to give a very abridged version of what you are going to want to choose. Again, you should know the basics about these 3 by now. But Vampire, you're going to want to take Vampire if you're going to be a tank. Vampire is very good for tanking, mainly due to supernatural recovery, which gives you extra magic and stamina recovery, and you also get undeath, which reduces your damage taken by 33% based on your missing health while you're below 50%. So Vampire is really good for tanks. It's also a decent option for magic damage dealers and healers. Good option if you feel like you really want that extra recovery. It's not mandatory. You do take extra fire damage. Do keep that in mind. And if you choose to PvP, you take a lot of extra damage from Fighters Guild skills. So maybe you might want to, be very careful with it in PvP. But for PvE, it's definitely a good option. And in terms of Werewolf is you're mainly going to want to use on stamina damage dealers if you want to use a Werewolf specific build. Otherwise, it doesn't really give a super amount of benefit. It's nice to have slotted because it's an ultimate skill. You can put that on your bar, and if you just are having that ultimate skill on your bar, you get some extra stamina recovery. So if you feel that you want that, that's nice. You suffer no adverse effects from not being in werewolf form. When you're in werewolf form, you take some extra poison damage, but outside of it, there's no adverse effects. Well, like I said, with Vampire, you just have adverse effects all the time. The extra fire damage and the extra, you lose some health recovery, and you take some extra damage from Fighter's Guild skills in PvP. But the bonuses from Vampire, in my opinion, definitely can help outweigh some of those costs. But in terms of what you should do, if you're not sure what direction you want to go in the game, I would personally recommend not using either of them. I think that if you don't really know what you want to do, they don't really offer any crazy benefits that you need to get them. You know what I'm saying? So I think that if you don't know what you want to do, if you're kind of not sure, forego them. If you know you want to be a tank, Vampire is definitely worth it, in my opinion. And for healer and damage dealer, for magic and damage dealers, I would say depends on you. It's nice to have that extra recovery, but do keep in mind you will be taking some extra fire damage. So again, weigh the pros and cons yourself and do what you feel is right. And for stamina damage dealers, Vampire really isn't going to be super you know, like wanted for you. And I do know some people who play vampire on stamina damage dealers, but it's not like a mandatory grab by any means. It's, again, kind of up to you. And then werewolf's a good option if you want to make a werewolf specific build. It's way more viable now than it used to be. But the TLDR version of this section it's pretty much your call. Vampire or werewolf are not mandatory by any means, but just do give some benefits to your character with, of course, some drawbacks attached. The next thing I'm going to cover is how you should be spending your gold as a new player. Your first time leveling up, what should you be doing with your money? There's only 3 things, in my opinion, that you should be spending gold on as a new player. And that is your mount training, your bag capacity, and your bank capacity. That's it. So if you want to get a mount, you get one through the level up rewards in the game. But if you want a different mount, you could also come to one of these mount guys throughout the world, and you can buy one of these horses for 42k. Again, a bit on the expensive side, especially for a new player. But when you are leveling up, you do get a horse as a reward from the level up reward. So you do get one at level 10, so don't worry too much about it. But when you equip that mount to your character, you can come to this guy once a day. You're going to want to come to this guy once a day and train your horse. So for each day, you can upgrade a riding skill for 250 gold. And I would recommend upgrading the speed first. Okay, speed is extremely important. Increases your movement speed while mounted up to a maximum of 60%. Trust me, you're going to want to do this first. Your mount feels like it's walking in quicksand without it. So this is very important. This can be shown on the map by this the horse icon. So you come to the stable master, use stable, and again, you'll have an option to increase your mount's speed, and it'll put on a cooldown timer. Now, in terms of stamina versus carrying capacity, I'd say it kind of depends on what you want to do. Carrying capacity, if you do not choose to PvP, I would definitely go with carrying capacity after stamina, and then do stamina last. But if you choose to PvP, I think stamina should be second, and carrying capacity should be third. Now, basically, like I said, it increases your stamina while mounted up to a maximum of 60, allowing your mount to sprint for longer and take more hits before you come dismounted. The sprint for longer thing isn't necessarily true. You can sometimes basically just sprint forever, even if your mount does run out of stamina. The biggest thing is that the dismounting. If you get hit while you're sprinting at full speed, when your stamina bar is low, you will get dismounted. So that's why for PvP, it's important to have a really high stamina on your mount so that if someone does try to hit you while you're riding by, you won't just get knocked off instantly and get stunned. So, like I said, stamina, in my opinion, second if you're going to be PvPing. If not, save it for last, and then carrying capacity second. Or you can pretty much just level these two in whichever order you want, but just definitely do speed first. Besides that, you should also level up your bag and a pack merchant, which can be seen right here at the bottom. The pack merchant, Smiling Freena, can be seen by that icon in your major cities. If you ever are not sure, like you only see like there's not that many icons here, you can hover over these weight things here. And that'll show you all the different stuff that's in that section. So you would go there and you can see the pack merchant and upgrade your backpack. And you could also use your gold while you're first starting to upgrade your bank space. So if you go to the banker, you can upgrade the amount of space that you have in your bank, which is shared storage throughout all of your characters. Very important to get, trust me. You want an upgraded bank. You collect a lot of stuff in this game, so having an upgraded bank is extremely important. Now, I do not recommend spending money on gear or other things while you're leveling. You're going to be replacing your gear as fast as you get it, especially if you're running dungeons. So spending gear, money on to have somebody craft you gear, or spending money to craft gear yourself just really isn't worth it while you're leveling. And in my opinion, you should just be saving it for later in the game. Like if you want to just maybe eventually you want to power level alchemy, or you want to buy a cool mount, or you want to spend your gold on enchants when you get your character to max level. Like, save your gold. You don't really need to be spending it while you're leveling. Just spend it on those 3 things and you will have quite the stockpile when you end, especially if you are doing the stuff I mentioned in the crafting section to make a little bit of extra gold on the side. The next thing I'm going to cover is the different perspectives. We are going to start with the focused perspective first, and then move into the unfocused perspective afterwards. But for the focused one, the first thing we're going to cover is your racial choices. Now, racials are going to change a bit with the Quarter 1 DLC for 2019. They did announce that they're going to make some changes to racial passes, but I have to imagine that the recommendations are going to stay roughly the same. Some other stuff might get, buffed a little bit and be a little bit more viable, but I have to, expect that the recommendations that I'm going to make here today, those aren't really going to change, and that those are going to stay relatively similar. So I'm going to tell you guys at the current moment which are the best ones, and then in the future I imagine that these will all still be very good options. And I'm not going to cover all the specifics of the races. If you are curious as to why I'm recommending what I'm recommending, feel free to check out the racial passives breakdown guide that I have on my website, dotsgaming.com, or you can find it on my YouTube channel. But your race is extremely important for your character's power, as it gives you passive bonuses that will really kind of help shape and mold the direction you take with your character. I have some recommendations later on for some general races that can do, you know, everything decently well. But for this, I'm going to be going into the specifics. So if you want to tank, the 3 races that I think do it the best are Argonian, Nord, and Imperial if you have the Crown Store Imperial race upgrade. So those are going to be your 3 best options. If you don't want to play in the Ebonheart Pact, though, because each faction has 3 races on it. The Covenant has 3 races, Aldmeri Dominion has 3 races, the Pact has 3 races, and then the Imperial can play on any alliance. But assuming you don't have the any race, any alliance upgrade, and you want to play on a different faction, if you want to play in the Dominion, my recommendation would be the Khajiit. I think that they offer a little bit more for tanks than the other 2. And then if you want to play on the Covenant, I would recommend going with an Orc. The next thing that I'm going to cover is stamina damage dealers. The best stamina damage dealing races, in my opinion, are Redguard, Orc, and Wood Elf. Khajiit is also not a bad option. The other 3 I think are a little bit better, but Khajiit is also not a bad option, especially for Stamina Nightblades. And then you also have Nord is a viable option for the Pact if you want to play in the Pact. They deal the least damage at the current moment out of the 5 races I talked about, but they are not a bad option. And then if you have the Imperial upgrade, they're also not a bad option. But in my opinion, at the current moment, Redguard, Orc, and Wood Elf are your top 3 choices for stamina damage dealers. In terms of Magicka damage dealers, you got 1 from every alliance. Breton, High Elf, and Dark Elf. Dark Elf is going to be your number 1 for anything dealing with flames, so specifically Magic DK, you're going to want to take advantage of Dark Elf. Breton's going to be your tankiest out of the 3, and High Elf is going to kind of be in between Breton and Dark Elf. So pick, you know, based on which, you know, which alliance you like, which one you like, or kind of which race is going to suit your needs the best. And then finally, in terms of healers, your best race for healers is going to be Argonian, Breton, or High Elf. Argonian's going to offer the most sustain at the current moment, followed by Breton, followed by High Elf. So it's really up to you which one of these 3 appeals to you the most. High Elf's going to deal a bit more damage with their passives. Breton's going to be a bit tankier, and Argonian's going to have the most raw healing output plus have the best sustain. So it's really up to you which one of these 3 races you want to choose, but none of them are a bad option. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to cover is attributes. Attributes are really simple for damage dealers and healers, but are a little more complicated for tanks. But for leveling, I'll give you a pretty simple explanation. So while leveling, if you're a Magicka damage dealer, you want to dump all your points into Magicka. Or if you're a healer, you want to dump all your points into Magicka. The reason is that allows you to cast the most amount of magical skills, and plus your Magicka skills deal more damage or heal more, the bigger your Magicka pool is. Same thing with stamina. Your stamina skills, as well as your stamina, like damage dealing skills / heals, will do more the bigger your stamina pool is, and you can also just cast more stamina skills. You can also block and dodge roll more. So if you're a stamina damage dealer, raising your stamina, putting all your points into stamina is going to be what you want to do. So for the tank though, you don't want to just go full into them, like, you know, for Magicka and healer, you went full into Magicka. For stamina damage healer, you went full into stamina. But for tank, you really don't want to do that. You kind of want to spread your resources out between all 3. For me, while leveling up, I'd say you can almost go pretty much equal into Magicka health and stamina. Maybe even lean a little bit extra into stamina. But you don't have to, like, when you get to the end game, you're going to kind of want to have certain attribute point thresholds, at least when you get to, like, you know, much higher, like CP 300, which is obviously going to be far away from most of where you guys are starting. But when you get to that point, you're going to want your health to be at least 35k and your stamina to just basically be higher than your Magicka. You know, going to be very important, because there's a certain synergy that you get in group play where when you click it, you restore your highest resource, which you want to be your stamina pool. So while leveling, though, I would just recommend doing like an equal spread between all 3 resources, but maybe like a tiny bit extra into stamina, just to make sure your stamina pool is always a bit higher than your Magicka pool. Alrighty, so the next section is going to cover spending your skill points as well as your gear choices. I'm going to go over gear first, I think, because it'll make this section a little bit easier to do if I can tell you what kind of gear you should be wearing. So if you're going to be a tank, you're going to want to focus on utilizing heavy armor and a one-handed shield. But you can also actually take advantage of a destruction staff, specifically an ice staff. But to start, I think using a one-handed shield is going to be easiest. And by the way, when you play ESO, you have access to not one, but 2 different skill bars, each having their own weapons. So while leveling as a tank, you can either level with 2 one-handed shield bars or a one-handed shield and a destruction staff. For Magicka damage dealers or healers, you're going to want to focus on double destruction staff for Magicka damage dealer, or for healer, 1 destruction staff bar and 1 restoration staff bar. The destruction staff bar is really, really helpful, just because it does offer some benefits to healers. Elemental Blockade is a really helpful skill for healers to be able to offer more debuffs to the enemies for their team. And Elemental Drain is also an extremely helpful skill for healers as well. So getting access to that is very helpful. And then for stamina damage dealers, you're going to want to use the rest of them, which is two-handed, dual wield, or bow. Focus on two-handed if you're going to be PvP-centric. Dual wield is more PvE-centric, and bow can be used in both. But again, you can pretty much pick and choose one of these, 2 of these 3 skill lines and level up your character using those. In terms of armor, you're going to want to focus on light armor if you're a Magicka damage dealer or a healer, medium armor if you're a stamina damage dealer, or heavy armor if you're going to be a tank. So that's what we're looking at in terms of like weapon and armor choices. In terms of how you should spend your skill points though when you're leveling up, I would definitely recommend spending your first 3 skill points when you get on your first skill from each of your class skill lines. And the reason I recommend doing that is because you want to try to, in my opinion, when you're leveling up, have 1 skill from each class line in both your front and back bar. The reasoning for that is that it'll help your skill lines level up, your class skill lines level up at roughly the same pace. And plus, you'll also be able to make sure that you're taking advantage of all of your class's passive abilities. ESO is a game of passives. All of the passives that you get from the ton of different skill lines you have, they all stack up and all contribute to your character's overall power. So for example, if on this guy I chose to forego slotting a siphoning ability, I would lose out on 8% additional Magicka from Magicka Flood, which is, I only get that benefit if I have a siphoning ability slotted. So making sure you have 1 skill from each of your class lines is really, really going to help in your character's overall power. And just like I said, for leveling up, it's just a really efficient way to level. Otherwise, in terms of skills, I would definitely recommend having 1 skill from your weapon line. So like, for example, this is my one-handed shield bar, so I'd recommend having at least 1 one-handed shield skill on there, just because it makes leveling up the line quicker than just using the weapons alone. Using the weapons does level it up, but using the skills will also help it go a bit faster, and plus, again, take advantage of the passives. And then same thing with your armor. Your armor, they do have skills. You can slot them if you would like to, not mandatory, but you also get these passive bonuses from wearing certain armor types. Now, speaking of which, I did mention armor earlier. You're going to want to, like I said, focus primarily on heavy armor when you're leveling as a tank, but do not ignore medium and light. You still want to level these up, and then same thing for the other 2 lines. They're still important to level up your other armor lines and wear other types of armor. So don't or ignore them just because it's not your like primary armor type. But basically what I would do is, like I said, get the skills from your class lines, your weapon lines, and then basically kind of fill out the remainder of your weapon bars as desired. You can pretty much experiment and try different skills in your skill lines, as you can see here. Or if you want some recommendations from me, you can check out the leveling builds on my website, dotsgaming.com, and those will give you some skill recommendations. But once you have kind of like some bars of skills and you're rotating through skills that you like, I would really recommend focusing on your passives, because your passives are going to give you a lot of additional power. Like if we just look at like my racial passives, so the racial passives I get for just being an Imperial, I get 10% additional maximum stamina, 12% additional max health. I get 10% chance to restore 7% of max health on a melee hit. From my siphoning line, I showed you 8% additional Magicka while siphoning skill is slotted. I gain 20 ultimate for just drinking a potion. So focusing on these passives and getting these passives is extremely important. So if you like can't get any more skills, or like you're not high enough level to get more skills, or you don't, you're happy with the skill loadout that you have, investing points into passives is going to be very important. And obviously the passives that you're going to want to focus on, like I said, are your class ones, the ones that are for the weapon lines that you're using, the ones for the armor lines that you're using, any vampire or werewolf passives, any guilds that you're taking advantage of, so either Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, Undaunted, or Psijic Order if you have Somerset. The Alliance War passives are good for PvP. Your racial passives are incredibly important, and then crafting passives if you are a crafter. The last thing that I'm going to cover for this section is your Mundus Stone. Which Mundus Stone you should use and why. So for those of you who do not know, a Mundus Stone is kind of like a standing stone from Skyrim. It's basically like one of those big stones throughout the world that you can just go and interact with, and it gives your character a passive bonus. So on this guy, I have the Atronach Mundus, which increases my magic recovery. So it's just a passive bonus that I get all the time. But they're incredibly important to grab because if you do not have one, you're literally just missing out on free stats that'll help make your character better. If you're tanking, I highly recommend the Atronach Mundus. It's extremely good. The extra magic recovery is really, really helpful. Another option is the Lord, which increases your maximum health, or you could also go with the Ritual, which increases your healing done. For a healer, the Atronach is by far the best. Gives you the magic recovery. Really, really good. If you're a magic damage dealer, you're going to want to go with the Apprentice, which increases your spell damage, or the Lover, which increases your spell penetration. For the stamina damage dealer, you're going to either want to go with the Warrior, which increases your weapon damage, or, again, the Lover, which increases your weapon penetration. So it's up to you from those choices which Mundus Stone that you want to use, but I would definitely be sure to pick up one of those when you are first starting out. Alright, so for the next part, we're going to be moving into the unfocused perspective. Now, for those of you who fall into this path, you're basically playing ESO, but you're not really sure what you want to do, what the game has to offer, or what role you want to play. You just kind of want to fire up the game and see what the world has to offer. And while most guides tend to ignore this type of person, I want to help you guys out with starting throughout your ESO journeys because, yes, I can help you level up in a way that will help you find what you like and help you still pick a race that will be able to complement your playstyle no matter what you choose to do. And in my opinion, there are a couple races that suit this type of path very well, and racial passes are extremely important in ESO. They really help contribute to your character's endgame power a lot. Like I said earlier, this might going to change slightly during Q1 of 2019. They do plan on making some racial changes, but I have to imagine that roughly these recommendations are going to stay about the same. One race I definitely recommend for that can work in any role is the Argonian. The Argonian just has really some passive benefits that can benefit anything. Tanking, healing, stamina, magicka, no matter what you choose to do, the Argonian's passes will complement any play style well. It will it's the top of the line race for tanking and healing at the time of making this video, but for magicka and stamina, it's always at the very least a solid option. So it's a really, really good choice. Another good choice that you have is the Imperial. I'm on a different server, so I don't have the upgrade over here, but the Imperial upgrade is another really good one. So if you have the Imperial race upgrade, they just get a huge flat boost to both health and stamina, which is really helpful for anyone. So if you do have the Imperial upgrade, the Imperial is another good jack of all trades race and is definitely another good option for you. You can also go with the Dunmer. The Dunmer get some magicka damage dealing bonuses, which will obviously go to waste if you choose to be a stamina damage dealer, but they do get some passive increases to both their magicka and their stamina, making them a pretty good jack of all trades race. Now, assuming you don't have any race, any alliance, and you want to know what your best options for the other factions would be, I'd have to say that most likely for the Aldmeri Dominion, it's tough because the races are kind of polarizing in what they do, but I'd have to say it really depends. If you have more magical leanings, I'd say you might want to give the High Elf a run. But if you want to have more stamina leanings, I'd say give the Khajiit a run. Wood Elf is basically just pure stam life. But I honestly think Khajiit might be your best jack of all trades option for Aldmeri Dominion. Because some of the passives can be used for other things besides just stamina damage dealing. So probably Khajiit for the Aldmeri Dominion. And then for the Daggerfall Covenant, again, it's pretty polarizing over here. But I would honestly say probably Breton is going to be your best jack of all trades race. You get a big boost to spell resistance, some spell cost reduction, which even stamina damage dealers will need, and then a bit of a boost to your magicka. But the ultimate jack of all trades races are definitely Argonian, Dark Elf, and Imperial. So if you like one of those three, those ones would definitely be your best options. All right, so the next part that we're going to cover is attributes for that of someone who isn't sure what path they want to take in the Elder Scrolls Online. So for that type of player, I honestly think I would recommend a hybrid between Magicka and Stamina, with like maybe the occasional point into health, but mainly focusing on your Magicka and Stamina pools. And the reason I recommend this is because in the Elder Scrolls Online, your skills will deal more damage or do more healing based off of the size of, well, based off not only the amount of weapon damage you deal, but the size of your Magicka / Stamina pool. So the bigger those pools are, the more damage those skills or healing those skills will do. And odds are, if you're not really sure what you want to do, you might be experimenting with a little bit of both. You might be using dual wield skills while still using some Magicka skills to deal damage. And if you go half and half into both Magicka and Stamina, you know, granted, will your skills be hitting for the maximum amount of damage or healing for the maximum amount? No. But if you went all into Magicka and then wanted to try a Stamina skill, it's not going to do anything. So at the very least, if you split between the two resources, all of your skills will still deal pretty decent damage. You can really experiment and find what kind of style that you really, really like. And then eventually later on in the game, you could always hit up a rededication shrine and commit to one attribute. Or, you know, you can stay with the hybrid if that's the kind of style you like. But for somebody with the unfocused perspective, not sure what they want to do, I recommend splitting your points mainly between Magicka and Stamina. I wouldn't go into health very, very much, if at all. But, you know, if you want to put the occasional point into health because you're struggling to stay alive, you can. But I would mainly focus on your Magicka and Stamina pool and splitting between those two. All right, so the next thing I'm going to cover is your gear options as well as the way that you want to spend your skill points. In terms of gear and weapon options, this is the unfocused perspective. The world is your oyster. You can pretty much do and use whatever you like. I definitely recommend wearing some of every type of armor. You're going to want all three armor skill lines leveled up by the end of the game anyway. Eventually, you're going to want to commit to one more than the other. But, you know, while you're leveling up, just wear different combinations of stuff and, you know, kind of have like a mishmash of gear on. I think it's actually good for the unfocused perspective to kind of be able to utilize all three different types of armors. In terms of your weapons, though, it's really up to you. It's really up to you. You can, you know, feel free to use, you know, dual wield and a destruction staff if you want, or dual wield and restoration staff, or two-handed and bow. Like, really, whatever suits your fancy is what you're going to want to use. Now, two-handed, dual wield, and bow are more stamina leaning. Destruction staff and restoration staff are Magicka leaning. And one-handed shield is tank leaning. So do keep that in mind when you are making your weapon choices and what you want to use. With armor, light armor is more Magicka leaning, medium is stamina leaning, and heavy armor is tank leaning. Again, keep those in mind when you're choosing what you want to use. In terms of how to spend your skills and do your skills and skill points, you're going to want to put at least one skill from every skill line on both your front and back bar, because yes, in ESO, you do get access to 2 weapon bars. The second bar is unlocked at level 15. But you want to have at least one skill on both your front and back bar, because this not only optimizes the rate at which your skill lines level up, because as I said earlier, your skill lines level up when earning experience, but the more skills from that line you have slotted, at least for the non-guild lines, the quicker they level. But another big reason is that you want to be sure to take advantage of all your passives from those skill lines. So for example, I wouldn't be able to take advantage of Magicka Flood if I didn't have a siphoning skill slotted. So I'd lose 8% Magicka simply because I don't have a siphoning skill slotted. So slotting one skill from both, from all your class lines on both your front and back bar is extremely important to take advantage of the passives. But like I said, also make sure that all of your skill lines level up in roughly the same type of rate. In terms of your weapon skills, you're going to obviously want to use the skills from whatever weapons that you want to use. So, for example, if you want to, use two-handed, you're going to want to at least have one weapon skill from that line on the bar. Now, is it mandatory? No, you can still level up the weapon and take advantage of some of the passes without having skill slotted. But the skill line will level up quicker with a skill slotted, and you will also be able to take advantage of all the passives if you have a skill slotted. And then you can also, again, just explore and check out the other skill lines that ESO has to offer. Slot some stuff if you'd like. But But definitely, like I said, make sure that you do focus on leveling up your guild skill lines. They are very important for your power, especially Undaunted, which is the one from the dungeons, because of Undaunted Metal, which increases your max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% per type of armor worn, so heavy, medium, or light. So by wearing 3 different types of armor, you do get 6% maximum stats. Obviously, like I said, later on in the game, you're going to need to commit fully to one armor type over the other, but over the other two, but you're still going to at the very least have one piece of the other types of armor on. So you do want to make sure that, you know, you have Undaunted Metal up, because it's just free stats. And then, you know, ESO is a game of passives at the end of the day. Very important. Very, very important to understand. Because if you just even look at my Imperial, like, passive skill lines, 12% increase to max health, 10% increase to max stamina, 7% health restored, 10% chance of melee attacks. They're incredibly good. All these passives stack up. You know, pressure points increases your weapon spell critical rating by X for each assassination ability slotted. So what I would really do is focus on getting the active skills on your bar that you want on your bar, and then when you aren't able to get any more active skills or don't want to put any on your bar, invest your points into passives, because all those passive bonuses really, really stack up over time and are going to be extremely helpful for your character's overall power. The final thing is your Mundus Stone. Now, for those of you who do not know, your Mundus Stone is basically a passive benefit that you get from just interacting with this big stone somewhere in the world. They're kind of like standing stones from Skyrim. It's just, like I said, it's just a passive benefit that your character gets. So I have the Atronach boon, which increases my magicka recovery by 238. Now, there's a lot of different choices here, and I think the best one for an unfocused perspective and for someone that isn't sure what they'd want to do is I'd personally go with the Lover. The Lover Mundus Stone increases both your weapon and spell penetration by a good amount. So, you know, if you're using a hybrid type of attribute setup and you're using skills that cost both stamina and magicka, the Lover is going to make sure that all of those skills are penetrating your enemy's defenses as much as possible. If you kind of have more leanings towards like healing or towards tanking, then you're going to actually want to use the Mundus Stone I have, and that's Atronach, which is the one that increases your magicka recovery by 238. That's going to be very important to you. But otherwise, I really do think the Lover is going to provide you the most benefit for kind of like that hybrid, you know, I'm not sure of what I'm doing kind of play style in ESO. I think it's going to really give you the most benefit and help you the most when you're progressing throughout the game. But that is it for me today, guys. The how to build your character for success video redone and updated for the current patch. I know this was a really, really popular guide of mine, and a lot of people really, really enjoyed it, and they felt that it helped them after the complete beginner guide really, you know, get their character in order and really, really level up and progress them. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this guide just as much as the other one, and maybe even took some more information out of this one than the previous one, being that my experience now is obviously way more than it was back then. Because of that, and because I do know so much more, I think, you know, I was able to put more information into the guide, and hopefully you guys were able to follow my train of thought and how I was basically kind of, you know, delivering the information to you, and that you guys did learn a lot, because ultimately that is what it's all about. If you have any questions about anything that I talked about or this guide, please leave a comment below. If you found this guide helpful and you liked it, please smack a like on it. And if you're unsure about any of the stuff I was talking about, or if you have any questions, check out the link to the complete beginner guide below. And if you want some recommendations on what skills you should use for your class, you can also feel free to check out the leveling builds on my website, dotsgaming.com. And for more great ESO content as well as general gaming content, please hit that sub button as well as hit the bell to keep notifications on. I hope you guys enjoyed this video very, very much. It was really fun to be able to remake this guide, and hopefully you guys enjoy it just as much as the original. So once again, I want to thank you all for stopping by. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you all in the next one.